Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Monday, September 22nd, and we had a lot of really good football this past weekend. We had a number of teams make some big-time statements like Texas Tech, Michigan, Oklahoma, and Indiana. We will start with those first, obviously. Then we'll get into some other big-time games. We had Miami kind of roll over Florida. Very weird game over there where Florida was in it for a second and then Miami kind of turned it up and took over. Missouri gets a huge win over South Carolina. Arkansas upset in just about the same way they lost last week, and a couple other things. Clemson losing as well. Then we just got to whip around to a number of other things. Arch Manning in Texas finally looked the part against Sam Houston State. We'll talk about that a little bit later. A number of other things, and then I have my first top 25. I figure we should wait through at least 4 weeks of the college football season before I give out my top 25. This was really hard to put together, so spare me just a little bit, but would love to interact with people and see what people think about that top 25 that we will get into at the very end of the show. But we had statement wins all over the place this past weekend. It was one of those weekends where you went in, you didn't have an Alabama-Georgia, you didn't have an Oregon-Penn State like we had this upcoming weekend, but you had a lot of games that were going to impact the CFP race, and a lot of them, the teams really kind of planted their flag a little bit more aggressively than I thought they would, and we'll start with Texas Tech. Texas Tech beat Utah on the road 34-10. This was incredible, and it was a game for much of this game. You know, going into the fourth quarter, it was 10-10. It was a very close battle. Baron Morton leaves the game with an injury after a very scary hit. Don't know what the update is with him, but we'll talk about that here in a second. But he had 2 INTs when he left the game as well. It was just very much a defensive battle for a long time, and people were thinking, are these teams ever going to find a way? Is it going to be a 13-10 game where it's just whoever has the ball last is going to be able to win this one? And then Will Hammond came into this game, and he tore apart that Utah defense. It looked like Utah kind of got a little bit tired out, a little bit worn down by the end of this game, and it's a huge credit to what Texas Tech has built, especially on the lines of scrimmage, and we'll talk about that in a second as well. But at the end of the day, Will Hammond coming in, going 13 for 16, 169 yards, 2 scores, and then adding 61 rushing. That's crazy from the kid, and a lot of people have been talking about should that be their starting quarterback going forward. I think there's an argument to be made there. I think the other part of that is Baron Morton's the outright leader of this football team. Him and Jacob Rodriguez are the guys that everyone looks to at every practice, at every workout, at every walkthrough. I tend to believe it's going to be Baron Morton's team. Obviously, with his injury, that kind of makes things a little bit up in the air, and we'll talk about what they have ahead. I tend to believe Will Hammond can, at the very least, get them wins until they get Baron Morton back to 100%. But I came into this game saying one thing for absolute certain. If there was a decided advantage on one side of the Utah offensive line against the Texas Tech defensive line battle, if there was a decided advantage one of those directions, that team might just be a little bit more than the Big 12 contender. It wasn't decided, but Texas Tech won this battle on the line of scrimmage. There's no two ways about that. Even on the defensive side of the ball with that incredible offensive line that Utah has, and it is incredible. It truly is. They're going to have 2 guys that get taken in the top 15 in the NFL draft. The rest of the guys are probably taken by pick 90 or 120 in the draft. They have dudes all across that line. Texas Tech nailed it. In the portal, they go get Lee Hunter. They have Skylar Gill-Howard in that room. They have Romello Height. They have so many guys. David Bailey, obviously, an incredible player coming over from Stanford. They have so many guys that are going to play NFL football where you look back at last year's team, they had talented players. Those guys aren't going off to play on Sundays. Now they're in the 2 deep or the 3 deep, and it makes it look a whole lot better up front for Texas Tech. So they hit on just about every single portal addition they made on the defensive side of the ball, including a guy like Bryce Pollock, played incredible defense on the outside for the vast majority of this football game. So Utah only had 3.8 yards per play in this entire game. They dominated this one. I believe 3.3 yards per carry, so it was incredible from this Texas Tech defensive line, and we'll talk about it here in a second, but they might be capable of a little bit more than just a Big 12 title. But for Utah, they looked a little bit lost offensively, and a lot of that has to do with the offensive line not playing the game that they are accustomed to them playing up there at Utah. But at the end of the day, it's a large credit to Texas Tech. It's going to be hard for me to sell on Utah. I'll be totally honest with you. I love the quarterback. I really do think this is more a blip on the radar and a credit to Texas Tech than anything else. That being said, you got outcoached and outplayed and outphysicaled from start to finish in this game. That doesn't happen to Utah very often. So there's definitely some things they have to figure out. Devin Dampier struggled for the first time this year. They go to Morgantown this weekend, so it's not like you're going to walk into a nice environment to get things right, but that should be a team you can beat. And then it's Arizona State and BYU. Got to get better fast. Got to find a way to win those 3 games. And then we could very well see this again in Arlington. Hopefully Utah can make it maybe a little bit more interesting that time around. But TCU is still lingering. Iowa State. There's a lot of teams in the Big 12 that will have something to say about it by the end. But this very well could have been a preview for the Big 12 championship. Just got to hope Utah plays a little bit better when it comes to that. But really can't say enough about Texas Tech. The job that Joey McGuire has done, not only going out and getting the guys, but getting the right guys that don't just walk into that locker room and immediately want to be the star of the defense or the star of the team overall. It's an incredible culture. He's done a great job over there, and now they have the talent that matches what the culture is, what they've done. Now, there are some problems. There's no doubt about that. No one player is shouldering the load, which is massive for this football team. I believe they had 3 guys with 60-plus receiving yards, so a lot of things went right in this football game for them. But 12 penalties, 122 yards, that can absolutely be a problem down the road. A couple of things to fix, but this Texas Tech team is incredibly impressive. A bye week next week before they get a Houston team that looks to be a little bit tougher than maybe some people thought before, but this team is rolling right now, and I think Texas Tech is firmly the team to beat in the Big 12. Michigan put on a show, 30-27 over Nebraska. It was 30-27. I fully understand that this game was close, that Michigan found a way to get a kick late to win this game. I don't know. It just felt worse than that. And I think part of it was Michigan totally misplayed the end of the first half where you let Nebraska get that Hail Mary at the end of it, and it changes the complexion of that football game. No doubt about it. But at the end of the day, it just felt like this was Michigan's game from start to finish. Dylan Raiola started really slow, just didn't really have a lot of comfort early on. Did kind of find it throughout this football game. We'll talk about him here in a second. But overall, you get a 75-yard run from Justice Haynes just about every week, you're going to be doing some pretty cool things offensively. But the rushing trio of Bryce Underwood, Justice Haynes, and Jordan Marshall is just going to be really, really hard to stop. They all had 30-plus yard rushing touchdowns. They had 31 carries total for 290 yards. It was ridiculous what this group was able to do. Now, the offensive line is going to run into probably bigger units, more physical units down the road, both in the Big Ten and in the playoff hypothetically. But at the end of the day, this is an incredible, incredible run game, and it's going to get them a very, very long way in this season. But remarkable stuff from them. From the start of the second half to about 3:54 left in this game, Michigan outgained Nebraska 189-49. They outscored them 13-3, and in the Big Ten, that's a whole lot of points. Is 10 points during that time. So that was the difference. Michigan found a way to come out of halftime and fix the things that were a problem in the first half, and they made enough plays late. But on the other side of things, for Nebraska, Dylan Raiola, I still think this is a good football player. I think he gets a little bit of happy feet early on. I think the offensive line not playing good football does not help that by any means, but I think there are some bad habits that he's going to have to get out of his system. A little bit, I don't want to say lazy, but just a little bit kind of my arm talent will handle this type of energy, kind of like a Quinn Ewers had at times during Texas. Just one of those things that you're going to need a little bit more crispness from him. I think he's an NFL quarterback. I really do. I do think he's going to end up being a great player, but when you go up against a defensive line like that and a defensive coordinator like that, he's going to have to be a lot crisper and a lot quicker through his reads than he was on Saturday. But also, the run game's got to give him more than 92 yards, so that is also a factor in this, no doubt about it. The people around him need to play better, but on top of that, I think he does need to play better, and I tend to believe that will come in time. Totally understand that Nebraska fans are getting maybe a little bit restless, because this was the game. There's no doubt about that. This was the game where a lot of things change, where you win a big-time game against one of the teams that you haven't been able to beat before, and you find a way to go forward, where you have a bye this upcoming week, then you get Michigan State, Maryland, Minnesota, Northwestern. You can be 7-1 walking into USC. Now, you could have been 8-0, and that would have been really awesome, but you could still be 7-1 walking into USC. You win that, you're back in the CFP conversation. I'm worried about this Nebraska team. There's no doubt about that. When you let a team kind of dominate you physically on the lines of scrimmage that aggressively, I don't know how confident I can feel that you're not going to slip up in the Big Ten at some point when you face these big body teams that they are going to face at some point. So I'm on the fence with Nebraska, I think. I think 2026 might be more the year. I saw someone actually comment on the page and made a great point that maybe this just isn't quite the year. They're not all the way there. If the offensive line gets a little bit better, the weapons get a little bit better, maybe 2026 everything clicks for Nebraska, but this one's got to be frustrating. There's no doubt about that. I think everyone looked at this game and said, if we can find a way to win in front of our home crowd against a top 25 team and a team like Michigan with that amount of prestige, it's going to be the moment. It doesn't change that this season can still have a ton of positives. You can go 10-2. You can still be in the playoff conversation, maybe in the playoff. A lot of great things can happen for this football team. And even if they don't go 10-2, you can go 9-3 and continue to build this thing up. And then 2026, you make a couple more portal moves. You find a way to finally put this thing all the way together. But it's got to be really frustrating. You're right at the top of the mountaintop. You feel like you're about to touch where you want to be, and then you fall back down. You got to figure it out. So plenty ahead for Nebraska. For Michigan, definitely a little bit of a tough path, but the reality is this is a very good football team that's going to be physically imposing about just about every team that they play. But they get a bye week, then Wisconsin should be a relative layup, USC, and then Washington. They win all of those, they very well might be a CFP team once again this year, which was not what I was thinking after the Oklahoma game. I can promise you that. Speaking of Oklahoma gets a win kind of like that Michigan game. They had a little bit more control in the Michigan game, to be fair, but they win 24-17 over Auburn. That 24 did a lot of help for -6.5 Oklahoma bettors, but at the end of the day, this one's really, really interesting. And we will get to the game here in a second, but we have to talk about the officiating. It was terrible. It was truly terrible. And it's not to say that Auburn got absolutely robbed. It's not to say that Auburn would have won this game by 14 if the calls went the right way. It's just to say we had multiple instances where the wrong thing happened, plain and simple. You have the play with Isaiah Satania, and everyone I've seen that's trying to argue Oklahoma's side says, well, he points at the ref. That just means that ref is bad at his job too. Plain and simple. That just means that ref is not good at his job the same way the head ref is, the same way the people in the booth not doing what they need to do and blowing that play dead are bad at their jobs. That doesn't make this better. It just makes it goofy. Also, the fact that they ran it all week doesn't make it better. It just means they ran an illegal play all week. That was ridiculous. That is absolutely something that should never happen. It's something that every ref should know to do. And frankly, a lot of refs that I've heard throughout the last couple of days have said, that's pretty much day one stuff. That is absolutely ridiculous that they missed that. The fumble review, we can argue about that all day. I fully understand that. I would actually argue that it was more incomplete than a fumble, if I'm being totally honest. It looked like that was not necessarily a fumble. That being said, I can ask probably 100 people or 50 people what they thought of that play. I'd probably get two different answers, and it'd probably be relatively split down the middle. That is the argument for this thing to be upheld. I tend to believe it should have been upheld because even I was sitting there saying, I tend to believe it's incomplete. I tend to believe he never had firm control and that ball just pops out and it hits the ground and that's that. But at the end of the day, I don't know that. I had no idea what that was going to look like. I had no idea what that was going to be. That should be an upheld call, plain and simple. And then you miss multiple PIs against Cam Coleman. I get they're going to be physical with that kid, and they very well should. But at the end of the day, you miss some bad ones. Now, it's not to say they all went Oklahoma's direction. Oklahoma had some missed calls that absolutely hurt them. I'm not making that argument at all. But you had two calls in this game that were just atrocious and should never happen and are absolutely ridiculous in my mind. I get the fumble thing. It's complicated, but the reality of the matter is I went on Twitter and saw it is a fumble. It's not a fumble. It's an incompletion. It's a catch. I saw a million different theories of what that play was. That means it should probably be upheld. I don't understand. 99% of games are not decided by refs. I think refs do an incredibly, incredibly hard job and get ripped a lot of the time. The reality of the matter is, though, we don't know who those refs are. I still can't tell you those refs' names. I bet Auburn fans can do that at this point, but I can't tell you those refs' names because they have no structure. They have no accountability to the people that they serve, which are the fans and are the players and are the coaches. And they're falling short, plain and simple. I don't understand why this is the case. 99% of the games are not decided by calls, plain and simple. And I don't know if this one was or wasn't. I know for a fact that a team won by 7 points where 7 of those points should not have been on the board, plain and simple. So that's the reality of this situation. You go back to the LSU South Carolina game last year. That was objectively decided by refs. We have to find a way to be better than this. We have to find a way to, at least the obvious calls, at least the ones where the guy is obviously trying to sub off the field, stops right at the sideline, and then runs a route. You have to know that that can't be allowed. If you don't, I'm sorry, you shouldn't be a ref in the SEC or in college football in general. Very frustrating. Now to the game. Apologies for that little bit of a rant, but we had to talk about that. This one was really, really tough for Auburn. And I think it's one of those games where you look back and you're thinking, that's the turning point. I think kind of like that South Carolina game last year, this Auburn team could very well go 9-3, be sitting at number 14 or 15 in the country, and they're on the outside looking in because of this game. That's got to be incredibly frustrating. Now, here's the big time problem. Your guy just got sacked 10 or 9 times, depending on where you look. I don't know why that's controversial, but at the end of the day, 10 or 9 times in this game you got sacked. A number of them were Jackson Arnold's fault. Just holding on to the ball way too long, not moving, not taking what the defense gives him. He's got to be better about that. And you go to A&M this weekend. If you think Cassius Howell is not going to get after you, you are sadly mistaken. It's going to get bad in a hurry if you keep playing that level of football for Jackson Arnold in that offensive line. Then you get a bye, then it's Georgia and Missouri. It's not going to get easier. You have to get more from your quarterback going forward. If he's going to get sacked 10 times every single game, you're going to lose every single game the rest of the way, and you're going to be the team that had all this hype coming in, looked good through a couple of weeks, and then the Oklahoma game was the one that sunk them. So a lot of things to figure out for them. For Oklahoma, it's as simple as this defense is world-class good, national championship good, and they have a quarterback that will make the plays. He was far from perfect on Saturday. He made a number of mistakes, wasn't necessarily as accurate as he has been in the past. The reality of the matter is you give this guy the ball with about 2.5 minutes left in the game, you're going to win that football game. Plain and simple. He finds a way to get his team down the field. They make play after play. They do the things that they're supposed to do, and he is someone that just makes plays. There is something about him. There's something about certain players in college football, whether you want to talk about Baker Mayfield or Stetson Bennett or someone else. Diego Pavia might be an example here. They just find a way to make plays. When you need a play to be made, they find a way to get it done, and he is one of those guys. So we'll see what happens the rest of the way. I think it's one of those things that Oklahoma probably didn't play their best football. Definitely on the defensive side of the ball, they played incredibly, except Cam Coleman's an alien, which makes things a little bit tougher. But at the end of the day, they played relatively good football, not great. John Mateer didn't play his great football. You find a way to win. You keep moving forward. It's a massive win for you. Then you get Kent State, and then it's Red River. That's the moment where Oklahoma and John Mateer turn from this really cool story that very well could become a really interesting team to a true national title contender. Now, Texas is a little bit questionable at this point. We'll talk about them a little bit later in the show, but at the end of the day, this is a very good football team that just has a defense that is absolutely suffocating and a quarterback that is going to make the plays when you absolutely need him. For Auburn, you're still a really good football team. Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and try to go get a big-time win in College Station. Then you're back to rolling. Indiana just dismantled Illinois. I don't even know what to say. I literally am at a loss for words after this football game because there were a lot of ways that this football game could have gone. I picked Indiana to win the football game. This is not how I thought it was going to go. Plain and simple. I didn't think Illinois was great. I didn't think they were a top 10 team. I definitely didn't think they were this bad. It was very, very rough. Now, I don't want to take anything away from Indiana saying that Illinois was bad. That's a good football team. That is going to be a team that goes 8-4, 9-3, right in that realm. Very fun team. They play USC this weekend, and we'll talk about that obviously on Wednesday. But you outgain a team by 400 plus yards. You outgain them on the ground 312-2. Ridiculous in every sense of the word. This Indiana team is better than they were last year. They have a quarterback that is better than they had last year, with all due respect to Curtis Rourke. Fernando Mendoza goes 21 for 23, 267, 5 touchdowns, enters the Heisman conversation. This guy's special, and he's a really, really fun player. He plays with passion, plays with energy, and he's a guy that can make every throw that you need him to make. He is going to be a Sunday guy. There's no two ways about that. That is why Indiana went and got him, and weirdly enough, this is a better football team than they had last year, and that was a really good football team despite what some people would say. Now, the schedule helped them. I'm not arguing that, but that was a good football team last year. This team is absolutely for real this year. You have a three-headed monster in the backfield as well. Kobe Martin went for 107, 2 scores. Kalen Black, 89 yards, 1 score. And then Hemby went for 65. It's just ridiculous what they can do up front. Pat Coogan's an incredible addition from Notre Dame at center. They've done an incredible job. Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper dominated. Can't say enough. I really love this Indiana team. It was a team that coming in, I felt like people kind of sold just a little bit too much. I was worried about them coming in with a lot of changes, but at the end of the day, when you have guys like D'Angelo Pons, Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper, Aiden Fisher, I was blanking on the linebacker's name. You're going to do a lot of special things, and man, did they do something special on Saturday. For Illinois, it didn't look right from the jump. You only had 29 rushing yards on 11 carries by running backs, and Altmaier went backwards a whole lot in this football game. One 59-yard touchdown. Early in this game, Colin Dixon was the only bright spot. You got to regroup because you got USC coming to town, and that offense is probably as potent as the Indiana offense for a number of reasons. So you got to be very careful, but going back to Indiana here for a second, just for half a second here, can't say enough about how hard what Curt Cignetti is doing right now is. Obviously, the portal gives you a leg up to build something like this relatively quickly and get this thing off the ground and do some incredible things pretty quickly in your tenure. No doubt about that. The reality is, coming into a place, transferring in a bunch of guys, going from the Group of 5 level to the Big Ten, and being able to win at the clip that he did last year, even with the schedule they had, was relatively impressive. Being able to do it after you lose your quarterback and after you lose a guy like CJ West up front and you lose some big-time pieces and then put it back together and be better the next year, ridiculous, especially bringing in a quarterback that is new to the system and is still figuring things out, and you have a number of moving parts in this program. This team's better than it was last year, and I don't think it's all that close. So it is a really special team. We'll talk about them later, obviously, in my top 25. We'll talk about them pretty close to my... We'll talk about them later in the top 25 is the way that I'll put that. But Indiana goes to Iowa this weekend. Huge one. It's one that absolutely is a trap game. You got to be very careful. Then you get a bye week, and then it's Oregon. You find a way to win that game, you are in the CFP. I feel very confident in that. Even if you lose it, you're very much in the conversation down the stretch. Huge win for them. They are very much in really good shape moving forward. As we talked about with Illinois, they get USC, which is going to be something to watch, absolutely. But at the end of the day, both these teams are still relatively in it. I don't think Illinois is going to be able to put it together to the degree that they're going to need to. I think Indiana is going to be able to. It's going to be really fun to watch what they do against Iowa this weekend, and then we got a big one against Oregon coming up, and then Illinois regroup against USC, and we'll see what happens in a couple of weeks here. But an incredible couple of games. It was 4 teams that came into this weekend, 8 teams that came into this weekend saying, we get this win, a lot changes in a hurry. Whether it was Utah getting a win and totally planting their flag in the Big 12, or Nebraska finding a way to become a CFP team, Auburn would have been a massive win for Hugh Freeze and company. And then Illinois, it would have been the win that kind of solidified where they were supposed to be. It all went the other direction. And it was incredible wins for all those teams, Texas Tech, Michigan, Oklahoma, and Indiana. Incredible stuff from them. But let's take our break. Let's take a little bit of a break here because we had a lot of games that we have to talk about from this past weekend. We'll get into a couple others right after this, so stick with us.